It was going well. Maybe not perfect, but it had a rhythm, a direction, a momentum you could almost trust. Then suddenly, the silence, the closed door, the conversation that changed everything. Something interrupted what you thought was working. And it didn't feel gentle. It didn't feel like God. It felt like chaos disguised in ordinary events. A delay that cost more than time, a disappointment that cracked something inside you, a change that came with no explanation. You've been trying to understand it ever since, trying to trace it back to what you missed or what you did wrong. But what if this wasn't failure? What if it wasn't punishment or proof that you're behind? What if the interruption was on time? You were interrupted, not abandoned, not overlooked, not set aside for someone more worthy. You were stopped because something greater was being gently rearranged behind the veil. It doesn't feel sacred yet, but it is, and before this script ends, you'll see how. For now, just breathe here, in this space where things stopped making sense, because in that very place, something divine has begun to move. Stay. Let this be the moment you stopped running, not because you gave up, but because heaven stepped in. It's easy to think you missed it, the moment, the window, the blessing that was supposed to be yours by now. You look around and see others still moving, still building, still receiving. And quietly, you wonder, what did I do wrong? Where did I go off track? But beloved, this isn't lost. This isn't wasted. This isn't punishment. This is handling. God doesn't throw his children into purpose unformed. He shapes them slowly, sometimes through stillness, sometimes through surrender. You haven't fallen behind. You've been picked up, carried, even in a direction that doesn't make sense yet. But just because you can't trace the map doesn't mean you've left the path. Sometimes, divine alignment looks like standing still while everything around you shifts. There's a tenderness to the delay, a mercy you can't yet see. You're not being punished. You're being protected from premature arrival. Even now, God's hand is on you, guiding what looks like ruin into a story only heaven could write. So don't rush to rewrite what he's still authoring. You're not off track. You're in the process of being realigned. And if this whisper found you at just the right moment, maybe this space was made for you. Here, we breathe slower. We trust deeper. We listen for what still speaks beneath the silence. If your heart needs more of this, peace that doesn't preach, truth that doesn't shout, stay close with us at Calm, Called. Subscribe now, and let's walk this unfolding together. Sometimes it's not just the plan that breaks, it's you. You held it all together for so long. The hope, the schedule, the version of yourself that could carry it. And then it unraveled. Not all at once, but enough to shake the illusion of control. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not now. Not after all the prayers, the obedience, the steps you thought were faithful. But there's something sacred about a soul that finally lets the ache surface when the strength gives out and grace steps in. You weren't weak. You were being broken open. There is a kind of breaking that doesn't destroy. It reveals, it shatters the shallow so the deeper can emerge. Before the breakthrough, there is often a breaking. Before resurrection, a tomb. Before new wine, the crushing. This is not your end. It's the cracking of the shell you no longer need. And if you feel fragile, that's okay. Heaven often starts in what feels like ruin. You've made it here, to this moment of quiet shift, And if you keep breathing, something holy will rise from the pieces. This is where it turns. Not because the pain disappears, but because you're finally allowed to stop hiding it. Stay, there's more to see, more to receive. The word detour feels accidental, like you veered off course, like this was never supposed to happen. But heaven doesn't operate in accidents. And what feels like a wrong turn might just be the road you never knew you needed. Think of Joseph, sold by brothers, thrown into a pit, forgotten in prison. From the outside, his life looked like a series of divine misfires. But every wrong step was actually a staircase, invisible to him, precise to God. There's a quiet orchestration to your life too, moments that didn't make sense then, but will one day form the thread of a story only heaven could write. You weren't delayed, you were being positioned, not punished, placed. The path you didn't choose still led to the place you were always meant for, and not because of perfect faith, but because of relentless grace. Maybe you thought detours meant failure, that God was done with you, that He'd moved on to someone more faithful, more focused, more worthy. But what if this winding road is sacred? What if the missteps were part of the choreography? What if the breakdowns were the very places where oil was being pressed from your life? There's design in the detour, precision in the redirection, mercy in what looked like loss. You are not wandering, you are being led. So today, instead of resenting the path, pause, breathe, look closer. What if this is not the way back to your life, but the way forward into the one He actually meant for you? There was something you wanted, a relationship, a job, a move, an open door that felt right. You prayed about it, you waited, and when it started to open, you reached for it with faith. But then, the door slammed. The offer vanished. The answer came back, no. And it didn't feel holy. It felt harsh, cold, like being denied something you needed. You questioned yourself, your discernment, your worth, maybe even God's kindness. But let's linger here. In the hard truth, sometimes God's love shows up as a block. Because He sees what you don't. He knows what that path leads to, who you would have become in that place, and what it would have cost your soul. Sometimes, mercy sounds like silence. Sometimes, protection looks like rejection. You were kept, not rejected, held back, not held down. That closed door? It was a blessing dressed in disappointment, a redirection wrapped in what looked like failure. And one day, you'll thank God for what didn't go through. You'll see the difference between what you wanted and what was actually right for your spirit. God doesn't just bless the yes. He blesses the no that kept you from walking into something that would have broken you in ways you couldn't recover from. This block, this interruption you didn't ask for, was sacred interference. So pause before calling it failure. There's wisdom in the closing, and tenderness in what was withheld. Even now, God is saying, I spared you. You thought it was a twist, a deviation, a cosmic interruption. But what if this moment, this messy, unexpected shift, is not the destruction of your plan, but the alignment of heaven's design? One, it's hard to see alignment when you're in motion. You're walking, striving, building momentum, and then, suddenly, you're paused. Everything you thought you understood is placed under divine revision. And you whisper, God, what are you doing? But heaven is not frantic. Heaven is precise, even in the pause, even in the twist. Sometimes the sharpest turns, lead to the deepest alignment. There is a way that feels right to man, but it leads somewhere you weren't meant to go. God didn't just interrupt you. He caught you, mid-flight, mid-stride, right before you settled for something beneath your calling. This wasn't chaos. It was course correction. Imagine a compass. If it's only 1 degree off, you'll end up miles away from the intended destination. So God turned you, gently, painfully, on purpose. That job that fell through, it would have consumed your peace. That person who walked away, they couldn't carry your calling. That plan you grieved, it was too small for the weight of glory ahead. You didn't lose the promise. You lost the version of the journey that wasn't built to hold it. This isn't the path you prayed for, but it's the one heaven prepared. It's not the detour, it's the precise lane where divine timing meets divine placement. Let the twist realign your trust. Let it remind you that your steps are not random. They're ordered. You are not drifting. You're being drawn into the version of your life that was always waiting beneath the surface. It's not complicated. It's not loud, but it echoes over and over. Will you trust me even when it looks wrong? Heaven has a way of asking questions that pierce through logic, breaking through the noise of self-defense and doubt. This isn't the kind of trust that happens when everything lines up. This is the kind of trust that breathes, barely, in the middle of confusion. Because what happens when it doesn't look like grace? When the door slams, the friend disappears, the path crumbles beneath your feet, and still you hear the whisper, "Do you trust me?" It's not an accusation. It's not a threat. It's an invitation. Because trust isn't proven in clarity. It's proven in contradiction. Abraham trusted in barrenness. Job trusted in loss. Mary trusted without a map. What about you? Can you trust that there's more happening than what your senses can confirm? It's okay if you hesitate. God doesn't shame your questions. He holds space for them, but eventually, He'll bring you back to this. Will you trust me even now? Even when the way doesn't feel holy? Even when my silence stretches longer than you hoped? This is where the soul softens, not because it has answers, but because it surrenders its demand for them. Sometimes, we don't need a solution. We need a posture, a quiet yes, in the middle of the unknown. So let's ask together, not for signs or shortcuts, but for the grace to trust the question. You can even whisper it now, if you're ready. Even now, I trust you. This wasn't your preference, not by a long shot. You had a picture in your mind, a timeline, a tone, a path that felt more you. But somehow, God took you the long way, the hard way. And you've spent hours, maybe years, trying to make peace with that, trying to find meaning in a route you would have never chosen. But here's a truth that rarely gets celebrated. God's way often offends our preference because it prioritizes formation over comfort. He knows what will actually grow you, shape you, refine what's eternal in you. And that rarely happens on the path we would have written for ourselves. You wanted ease, He offered endurance. You prayed for open doors, He gave inner strength. You asked for clarity, He gave character. This is not punishment, this is preparation. Because if He had let it unfold your way, you would have reached the destination, but without the depth to sustain it. What you call delay, He calls development. What feels like wandering is actually pruning, trimming what can't go with you into the next season. The hard way has done something the easy way never could. It's made you tender. It's made you resilient. It's made you real. This way, the one you didn't want, it has given you eyes to see and a heart that knows how to hold holy things. It has stripped the unnecessary and revealed the indestructible. So no, this wasn't your preference, but it was your becoming. And you may not say it aloud yet, but deep down, you know it's true. This was the way you needed. Some things felt like endings, sharp, final, unrecoverable. A friendship that faded, a door that closed without reason, a season you thought would last and didn't. It felt like loss, and maybe it was, but maybe not in the way you imagined. Because not everything that dies is gone, and not everything buried is lost. Some things are simply seeds, covered, yes, but not forgotten. Hidden, yes, but held. Seeds do their deepest work in darkness, in silence, in stillness. You won't see them break open, you won't hear them sprouting, but beneath the surface, life is forming. What you thought was loss might have been planting. What looked like failure was actually the burial of potential. And that ache you've been carrying, it might be the tension of something about to break through, not as what it was, but as what it was always meant to become. It's okay to grieve, to name what hurt, to admit that you didn't want it to end. But after the tears, let trust grow roots. Because if God allowed it to be buried, He's already scheduled its rising. Not everything you lose is gone. Some things are waiting for divine timing to bloom. So don't dig up what God is growing. Don't rush the seed. Don't curse the soil. 0, 7, even now, underground, unseen, something sacred is taking form. Trust the process. Trust the silence. Trust the seed. This isn't the first time everything changed. Not the first door that closed, the first plan that unraveled, the first season that made you question everything. And deep down, you know this voice, this sacred interruption, this divine whisper that stirs when things fall apart. You've felt it before, in moments you almost forgot, in chapters you swore would break you, but didn't. You've been here, not exactly here, but close enough to remember how grace showed up last time. It's easy to forget, especially when pain gets loud, but memory is a sacred tool. It brings clarity where fear brings confusion. So pause, look back, not to dwell in the past, but to remember the pattern. He came through, He redirected, He protected you from what you begged Him for. And somehow, what didn't make sense then became peace later. That's not coincidence. That's faithfulness. He's whispered to you before, in job losses, in heartbreaks, in changes you didn't ask for, but needed. And every time, He stayed. He didn't rush your healing. He didn't abandon you in the questions. This moment you're in now, it's another echo of a God who hasn't changed. You've heard this whisper before, and it led you through. It calmed your storms. It reminded you who you are when everything else was stripped away. You're not new to being rerouted. You're just being invited to remember. He who was faithful then is faithful now. The voice hasn't changed, but maybe this time you'll trust it sooner. This is the moment. You look back, and the threads start to connect. The silence? It wasn't abandonment, it was instruction. The delay? Not punishment, but divine patience. The closed doors? Protection. The twist? Precision. You didn't see it then. You couldn't. That's not failure. That's human. But heaven has been consistent, quiet perhaps, but never absent. Now, You can breathe differently. The ache still lingers, but it doesn't rule you. Because somewhere along this strange, winding path, you discovered that redirection was not rejection, it was mercy with a different name. You were not being tossed around, you were being positioned. The pauses were placements, the losses, recalibrations, the breakdowns, baptisms. Heaven does not need your map. It has its own, etched in eternity, unfolded in time, revealed in trust. You weren't late. You weren't forgotten. You were hidden until the right moment. And now, the light has shifted. What felt like ruin has rhythm. What looked random now reveals design. This was divine all along. You were carried. You were seen. You were never lost. Even now, you are standing in something sacred, even if it doesn't look how you pictured. Sometimes, what God builds doesn't look impressive to the world, but it's eternal to heaven. And this life, to your life, has been marked, not by mistakes, but by mercy. You didn't ask for this path. It wasn't your first choice, or your second. It arrived uninvited. And yet, here you are, wiser, softer, marked not just by what you've endured, but by the God who walked with you through it. So now, as you stand at the edge of what comes next, let this be your blessing. May you release the map you once clung to in fear and receive, instead, the steps of peace. May your heart no longer demand clarity before it trusts. May you see the closed doors, not as rejections, but as divine redirections, written in mercy. May you look at what you called loss, and recognize it as sacred planting, the kind that grows quietly in the dark, until its time comes. May your grief be seen, but not your final companion. May hope find you again, not in perfect answers, but in perfect presence. And may you dare to believe that the life unfolding now, the path beneath your feet, this unexpected, winding, holy way, is exactly where God still meets you. Right here, in what doesn't make sense, but somehow holds peace anyway. Let's breathe into that together now. God of the unknown way, thank you for not giving us what we thought we needed. Thank you for the mercy of interruption, the redirection we didn't understand. You see further than we can. You protect in ways we may never know. You lead not by force, but by quiet alignment. We give you this path, the one we didn't choose. We lay down our questions, not for answers, but for your nearness. Even now, we trust you. Again, still, always. And if your soul needs reminders like this, in the middle of your week, at the edge of surrender, stay close with us here at Calm Called. Subscribe now, so that when the next whisper of peace comes, it finds you ready to receive it.